We are now here. In northern Mozambique, touching the border to Tanzania, there is the province of Cabo Delgado. The Querimba archipelago stretches along the coastline, including about 12 larger islands and countless smaller islands and larger and smaller rocks. The islands are near to the coast, and some of them can be reached by foot at low tide, using sandbars and coral reefs and crossing the mangrove swamps. Also, island hopping by foot is sometimes possible, but not really recommended. Long before the Portuguese explored the East African coastline, the so-called Swahili coast, there were a Muslim Arab population at every harbor. The Sultanate of Oman controlled the main trading places like Querimba, Zanzibar, Malindi, and Mombasa, but also all other small harbors like Querimba and Ibo in our archipelago. In 1522, the Portuguese raided, plundered and destroyed Querimba and burned it down. Some Portuguese were granted islands by the crown, and in 1590 nearly all islands had a señor. The population had to pay tribute to these señores, and these señores had to provide food, meat, cereals and coconut products for the Ilha de Mozambique as a rent. All Portuguese possessions around the Indian Oceans were administered by the General Captaincy of Goa. In 1593, the Swahili coast was divided into the captaincies of Mombasa and Mozambique. The border became Cabo Delgado. The Cape as a borderline? Yes, this worked in those times, as the main line and the inner Africa did not matter. In 1609, Ibo was described as a partially fortified, and in 1630 they had already cannons. The natives of the mainland often raided the islands at low tide, so the fortifications are facing landward. In the 18th century, all islands were lifetime fiefs, a closed community with many slaves, which began to trade with the mainland, including ivory and cowries. But the labyrinth of estuaries, mangrove swamps, shallows and narrow fairways with small hidden harbors brought an economic boom for another forbidden merchandise, slaves. In 1752, Mozambique became a known general captaincy. The new governor-general erected a fort on Ibo Island, and the prospering town got the city rights. Large streets and magnificent buildings were built. In the 18th century, Ibo was the second largest business center behind the Ilha de Mozambique. At the end of the 19th century, began the period of the large companies in Mozambique. Portugal was too weak to administrate or even to develop the East African possessions. The Companhia de Mozambique, the Companhia de Nyassa and the Companhia de Zambésia, all of them larger than most European countries, ruled autonomous like governments. Additionally, there were lots of smaller companies. Some had their own currency, others worked with plantation tokens. The natives were treated badly and the Portuguese government did not act in any way. It was only in the early 30s that international pressure forced the government to end these cruel times. The companies were dissolved, the Portuguese state took control over all parts of the colony. All private currencies were put to an end, and the escudo was made the only currency in Mozambique. Tokens are known of the three larger islands of the archipelago, Querimba, Ibo and Matemo. On the island of Ibo, there existed uniface aluminium tokens stamped S, K and B, and the others are O. Also counterstamped Portuguese coins of 20 reis were counterstamped with AI, CM, CSI and SI. The legend SK and B is unsolved until now. The presence of Indian versions has two very different reasons. On the one hand, the role as traders and financial advisors of the Sultanate of Oman, which moved its capital in 1840 to Zanzibar to control the complete Swahili coast. On the other hand, there was in 1860 an immigration wave from Gujarat in India to South Africa. Arriving there, they were faced by racism and traveled to De Lagoa Bay, which was called later Lourenço Marques and even later Maputo. There they found traders with Indian roots. The new immigrants were Hindus, Sunni Muslims and Ismailites. They formed the medium-sized trader class in the colony. The members of the Hindu traders caste of the Bhatiyas and the Khoyas, the Ismailite Indians, dominated the trade and the finances of the Sultanate of Oman. According to Sir Bartle Frere, there was around 1873 not a single shopkeeper all along from Zanzibar to Madagascar and Mozambique which was not of Indian origin. In the middle of the 19th century, Indian traders started financing expeditions into the interior of Africa, Arab ones, European ones, and American ones. Along the routes, they placed trading posts, so-called cantinas, and around 1870, Seva Haji Paro organized his own expeditions. His trainee, Alidina Visram, founded in the 19th of that century a retail chain which had around 40 branches and many factories covering the complete Swahili coast. He was soon copied by Ranchodes Oda, a Bhatia from Kutch, born in Bombay and working in the ebony trade in Zanzibar. He moved his activities to Ibo and expanded very quickly along the coast. Later he moved to Porto Amelia, today called Pemba. In the late 19th century, he was the most mighty man in the whole province of Cabo Delgado. He was the bank and financed many companies, not only of Indians, but also of Portuguese. The next token has a countermark CM on a Portuguese coin of 20 reis, dated 1884. According to Hearn's Handbook of Southern African Tokens, this countermark stands for Camisa Magaga. I could not confirm this until today. Nothing is known about the countermark SCI. Perhaps it stands for Sociedade Calanche Irachande. The next countermark is IS. The trader Suleiman Isaac is mentioned in the Portuguese Commercial Almanac of 1960. About a third of the island of Querimba belonged to the plantation of William Philippi and Company in Hamburg. 700 hectares land with about 70,000 cocos palms, which make 3 to 4 million coconuts a year. These coconuts were brought to Ibo at low tide. The carrier got a token for his delivery. Back on Querimba, he could change the token in goods of the company. So it is a classical truck token or truck token. I don't know exactly. In 1911, the company was reorganized into William Philippi and Company GmbH, German, standing for limited or limitada. Also, the design of the tokens changed into WPCL. They exist unhold, central hold, and top hold, often with circles at different positions. The meaning of all these different signs is uncertain, but for sure not by accident. In 1926, the plantation became more and more unprofitable and was sold to the Gessner family and exists still today. At least in the first 10 years, these tokens were still in use under the new owners. As a regular colonial small money reached Mozambique not before 1936. Matemo, the third island, is situated 15 kilometers north to Ibo. There live about 1,000 islanders along the coastline. Only here we found countermark tokens using Portuguese coins of 4 centavos as a host coin. These were minted 1917 until 1919, but they could not prevail. In 1920, they were replaced by coins of 5 centavos. These replaced pieces of 4 centavos started probably a second career as tokens on Matemo. They were found there, often where they hold. Others were stamped FC. This legend is still unsolved. 3 pieces are known. One belongs to the collection of Alan Jacobs, author of Hearn's Handbook of Southern African Tokens. The second one was sold once at Spinks in London, and this is the third one. Many thanks.